everyone. Welcome to the Q&A Cafe here at the Georgetown Club in Georgetown, and having our end of 2018 holiday lunch. You may be watching this in 2019. You may be watching it in 2020. Everything we say will remain relevant, right? And I want to welcome everybody who's here today, and those of you watching at home or on whatever device you may be watching us upon, and especially to welcome our guest, Brian Noyes, baker extraordinaire, bakery owner extraordinaire, and now also author extraordinaire of the Red Truck Bakery Cookbook. Hello, Brian. Welcome.
Hello, Carol.
So I think I should also say that in addition to all the wonderful baked goods you have brought us today, both in your book and in fact, which only these people will get to enjoy, I want to thank Georgetown Cupcakes especially because they sponsor us year in and year out.
Oh, great.
And you'll see what they've done for you today.
Okay.
And we'll show it to you.
Well, excellent.
Yes. Anyway, so welcome. You've been very
thanks a
busy.
lot.
You've been on an epic book tour.
I have. The book came out October 23rd. I've got a great publisher, Clarkson
Thank you,
Potter,
Joe.
Random House.
Thanks.
And we've set up a whole tour through the South, and it's wedged between the end of October and Christmas,
Yeah.
and it's been a whirlwind.
Yeah.
And every little detail was designed for book tours, demos, book signings, and I fell at the bakery and tore my rotator cuff and had shoulder surgery, so I've been walking around with a whole sling until the day before the book came
Right.
out.
I know. Isn't it wonderful? No, it's not wonderful, but it's amazing that you've gone through that, because you and I have been sharing not just treats, but we've both had major surgery. I had my knees done. You've had your shoulder done.
I was the guy that was going to walk her up and down the cobblestone streets of Georgetown
To get my...
until I realized that we both couldn't do it and both needed one another.
Yeah, I know. And I think we're not heavily medicated right now, right?
I can only speak for myself.
Okay, I'm actually, I'm clean for the moment.
Well, we'll take care of that with Bourbon.
But you look great, and it's amazing that you've been doing that, recovering. And if your Instagram feed, and everybody should follow Brian on Instagram, your Instagram feed shows you've not slowed down at all despite the surgery. So bravo.
It's been fun.
And book sales have been great, and reviews have been great.
You know, every place we go, we have no idea what the turnout's going to be. We have a whole pile of books. We have just a truckload of cakes, and everything's gone.
Yeah,
I mean, the cakes are gone. Last night we were at One More Page Books in Arlington, and the books were gone. The pimento cheese, the focaccia, everything was wiped out.
What do you think this is about? Do you think that people just have an insatiable...
People are hungry.
They're hungry all the time.
Insatiable, right,
Yeah,
period.
because they're, I guess cookbooks, like children's books, will always have an audience.
Well, it's a bakery. It's not tennis shoes, so there's a little more warmth and romance to it. And, we ship all over the country, but it's all coming out of a sweet little charming rural location. I kind of grew up in the National Trust for Historic Preservation, so I knew that we had to be in not a strip center next to a nail salon somewhere, but I wanted to be in some old historic building.
I think you're very authentic.
Yeah, it's full
Small
of charm.
town America, rural
And
America.
I'll tell you the whole backstory in a second, but we ended up, the first location was an old 1921 SO service station in the heart of the county seat of Fauquier County.
Warrenton, Virginia.
Warrenton.
Yeah.
And it's just this gorgeous little...
But not a food wasteland, I should point out,
No.
because you're 20 minutes from the inn at Little Washington, which sort of had planted an initial flag for food out in that region.
And he, Patrick kind of told us about who's out there and local purveyors, and that was really drummed into my head, and that's what we're all about. We're a seasonal bakery. You can only get a cherry pie in cherry season.
Mm-hmm.
People still want one right now for Christmas, but it's sweet potato, pecan, or apple season.
Well, you educate them gently that we don't want to give you foods that aren't in season. So
exactly.
But your story and Patrick O'Connell's aren't dissimilar in that Um,
We both started in a garage.
You both started in a garage, and you were both chasing a dream, in a perhaps illogical location where you had to do a lot of training. You opened in the place that suited what you envisioned your business to be about, but then you had to find the people to work for you. I mean, how many people work for you now?
Well, when we started, there were 3 besides myself.
Yeah.
And now we have 48 or so, 2 locations. And it's been a little crazy. It's hard to find people out there.
Mm-hmm.
I thought when we moved to our second larger main location, we still have the little gas station in Warrenton, but we're now in Marshall. We're right off of 66, so I thought, well, maybe there's a better hiring pool flying down the freeway from Fairfax or DC.
Right.
But of course, that's kind of true, but they're all going the other way to Shaw and Penn Quarter, and as
But
restaurants
are all of you
burgeon in
familiar
town.
with where we're talking about, Marshall and Warrenton, Virginia? Because what's interesting about Marshall, kind of like Warrenton, is that there wasn't a lot going on there. And now, I mean, I'm talking 20 years ago, but you go now to
5
visit.
years ago, it's the same
Even
story.
5.
In fact, it got worse. We outgrew that location. We needed a second location for shipping, and just because we had grown. And I once again looked at Marshall right off of 66. It's a cute, kind of down on its luck, little main street.
It's a one-stop light town.
Exactly. And the family grocery store of 50 years, family owned, closed. And, you know, there's a lot of vacant buildings there, or were. And we signed a lease on a former pharmacy built probably around 1910 or so, with a Masonic lodge upstairs, and adjoining it is, which is now conjoined, a second building that was a little sweet shop and with a little secret tavern in the back, I think. In its last incarnation, it was kind of an
hooch is one of your themes. So.
Well, we'll get to that in a second. But it was kind of an ashtray bar, and when we took over the lease, there were off-track betting machines lining the hallway to the bathrooms. And they're gone. And
but you've got, I'm not sure if I'm correct that Field and Main is Michelin rated.
No, they're not.
They're not, but
they'd love to be.
But I think they're highly rated by Tom Seitzman.
Right.
But you've got all these places that have opened up around you.
Right. So when we moved in fact, during our renovation, I got a little nervous because all I could see were a few guys kind of scruffy riding bikes back and forth on the sidewalks, and you know, and nobody going to any businesses because there weren't really much of any there. So we opened on Labor Day 3 years ago, and our friends Star and Neil Wavra from the Ashby Inn opened Field and Main Restaurant, a farm-to-table restaurant right across the street. And within 3 months of them opening, both their restaurant and our bakery were in Tom Seitzman's dining guide, which is really great for them.
And you've got other markets up and down the street.
We've got a great butcher shop, the Whole Ox, right down the street.
And it's such an easy stop off the highway. So
so it's really cool. So here's a butcher, a baker, and I so hope that Field and Main would have called themselves the Candlestick Maker, but that didn't happen. And then lo and behold, next door in the vacant bank, a food business from Middleburg closed their doors there and moved down and opened up a butcher, a bakery, and a little cafe right next to us.
But do they have candles?
And an organic market. I don't know.
Okay, well, we've got to get some candles out
so
there.
we were all worried, the 3 of us, because we're kind of this happy little family on Main Street, Marshall. And the weekend they opened, it was our busiest weekend ever, and it hasn't stopped.
But more is more, right?
Yeah, a rising tide lifts all boats.
And now you just need an inn.
And a bookstore.
Okay. I want to take you back, though. We're in the middle of your story, and let's go back to California, where you were raised, right?
I'm a 5th-generation Monterreyan.
Son of a newspaper man.
Right. Moved down to Southern California, and after high school, while I was at Cal State Fullerton studying journalism and communication design, I became the art director of a weekly newspaper in Corona del Mar. And do you want me to tell that whole food story?
No, I think it's very interesting because I think one of the most interesting things about your story is you had one completely other career and then you switched to this career, which is something a lot of people think about and they don't necessarily have the guts to try it, and you did it because you got the seeds of baking planted into your system when you were young, but you went in another direction. So yeah, please tell the story.
Well, that's I was an 18-year-old art director at this newspaper. John Wayne lived nearby. He was getting along, and we wanted to do a big feature story. So we had gone over and worked with his housekeeper to lift photos off their wall, bring them back, copy them, resheath the back, and the story ran, and I returned them to the housekeeper. I was a teenager and I'm carrying a big box and it was heavy, and so I started banging on the front door with my foot, and she didn't answer, but he did, and scowled at me and wondered what that was all about. And then he says, "You want a tuna sandwich?" And I'd just eaten, and I thought, of course I want you to make me a tuna sandwich. So he did, and he showed me how to do it, and I went through the whole process I talked about in the book. But at the very end, he picked up a handful of potato chips and smashed it into the tuna and then capped it off with toast. And he gave it to me and he says, "This is why you'll like this." And I wasn't about to disagree. And it taught me that there's no rules to food. And I kind of haven't forgotten that.
But there are no rules to food, and there's so many ways to use potato chips.
Exactly.
They're a wonderful thing. But
and you eat whatever the Duke says.
Yeah, you do. And does your tuna sandwich come with a bag of potato chips?
The potato chips are very nearby.
So that you can...
Yes.
Your sandwiches are amazing. I tell people all the time, in person and on social media, how much I love your meatloaf sandwich.
I know that about you.
Because a meatloaf sandwich is, a good meatloaf sandwich is a difficult thing to find. And while you may be known for all your baked goods, you do have an amazing array of sandwiches.
Oh, good. Well, thanks.
Yeah, no, it's true. But I want to go back to Uncle Stan.
Okay.
Because even before John Wayne introduced you to the tuna sandwich, it was your Uncle Stan who was a very key influence.
He lived in Florida. It was my only uncle. My mom was an only child. My dad only had one brother, and that's Uncle Stan living in Clearwater, Florida. He was married and they had 11 kids. So I had 11 cousins that were clear across the country that I never ever got to know until I started flying back just to meet my cousins and my uncle. And that started a cross-country bake-off. He was a big kitchen what's the word I want? Not tinkler, but
he meddled in the kitchen.
Around.
Yeah, he messed around.
Muddle's a good word. And tinker is what I want.
Yeah.
And he would send food, and I would love it. And I would send food.
But did you
back.
watch him? Did you first see him baking though? Did you see the process and get involved?
We probably tinkered in the kitchen together.
Yeah.
And my aunt was always the one cleaning it all up. But then I sent him some bread I made with a recipe. And then he sent back the recipe all written up in corrections with a red pen of why this might taste a little better.
Yeah.
And so then I moved to Tampa and became the art director of City Magazine. And so...
But what secrets did Stan teach you? I mean, were there things he taught you that you still use to this day?
Well, I use his James Beard book today, which is just covered with all our food splashes and his notes and little love notes to his wife that he'd tuck in there, or she would tuck in there. And
did he have a particular kind of flour, or did he have? Did he have
was
opinions?
Always the guy that bought the newest, coolest thing. He drove a Pacer. He drove a Thing. I mean, whatever weird stuff came out, he had. And so, he studied food, just armchair study, and he would have some, King Arthur flowers or, white lily or some wacky ingredients, kind of multi-grain things. And those all made its way into the bread that we both worked on and that we sell at the bakery now.
Have you named anything after him?
Uncle Stan's Harvest Wheat Bread.
Is his name on? I don't have the bread in
Yes,
front of me.
yeah,
But I love that bread.
I wasn't allowed in today without bringing
I
Carol.
know, my addiction.
So at 4 a.m, I drove from Arlington to the bakery to pick that up for after
Don't even tell me that. I feel so
a
guilty.
2 a.m. text.
Oh, I hope you had other reasons to. Well, you do. But the fact is, you do commute. Before anybody wants to live your life and think it's the dream life, you drive to work every morning at 3 a.m., 4 a.m.?
Yeah, I mean, it used to be that. I've got a good crew in the kitchen now, and especially with this book tour happening, and then the fall and the shoulder surgery before that.
Yeah, but you didn't
They
start out
stepped up.
leaving. But when
Yeah,
you
yeah.
started out, you were driving
Oh, no, I was the guy. Especially in Warrenton, it was just me and a junior baker next
before
to me.
the sun comes up.
So, yeah, it's be there at 3 a.m. and get it rolling.
But you did set aside any dreams of baking, and you did go into art direction, and that was influenced somewhat by your father, who was in the newspaper business.
Yeah, I mean, as he always said, once you get newspaper ink in your blood, it's there forever. And I mean, I've always had an interest. My jobs have only been in newspapers or magazines. That City Magazine company in Tampa was owned by one in Detroit, so I moved from Tampa to Detroit to Houston, and then came to interview with Ben Bradley at the Post as the Sunday magazine was starting up 34 years ago or something. So I've been here ever since.
But it's not every day that somebody gets brought by Ben Bradley to Washington what skills did he see in you? What did you send to him that got his attention, do you think?
Well, now I send bread and cakes to everybody. I treat them as my business cards or a granola. But I think back then it was samples of my work from publications and the redesigns.
Was there something in
hit it off
particular that he had been struck by?
I don't know. There were probably some magazine redesigns. He wanted it slick. He wanted it to be closely aligned with what the New York Times Sunday magazine was.
Yeah. Because your magazines at that point have been House and Garden, Smithsonian.
Since then, Smithsonian, Preservation Magazine, and Architecture.
Yeah, that's an impressive resume.
And it was fun, but I hit 50 and I thought, if I'm ever going to follow this food dream and open up my own joint and do my own design for me, I better get on it. And
And what year was that?
Oh my God, I have to figure that out. Well, it was about 12 years ago or so, 10, 11 years ago. But I was going through the CIA Culinary Institute program. I went through l'Académie des Cuisines here.
And were you doing that as a weekend hobby?
I was
still doing your day
as
job and still working at the Post?
And then some weeks off during the summer or a big semester up in Hyde Park.
Were you working at the Post, but then also trying to find some customers on the side, see if your goods were marketable?
No, at that point I was just training. I knew I wanted to do something. I figured it was going to be out there where my farmhouse is in Fauquier County. Dwight and I bought a farmhouse in the town of Orleans. Ever the art director, I thought, this place needs a red truck, an old red truck. And so I went online and I found one for sale that was gorgeous. It's on the cover. And I got turned over to the owner who happened to be Tommy Hilfiger, selling it from his farm. And so he trucked it down to Virginia. I drove it out to the farmhouse. I baked on weekends, either in Arlington or out at the farmhouse. And I would load that thing up and I would drive to this little country store nearby and then just sell inside the store. It wasn't a food truck, but
you were a truck pop-up.
I know. I was the first food truck, I guess. But
yeah, literally.
Yeah. So pretty soon, people were lined up at the store an hour before they opened, not for them, but for me, and bought our pies and quiche and granola, our focaccia, and some of that ended up at a picnic in Little Washington where Marion Burroughs, who's a food writer for the New York Times, was there.
Yeah.
And she, the next week, wrote me and asked if she could do a story on me for the New York Times. And I thought for a nanosecond and said yes. And I had a little fledgling website. I was still working at the Post and then Smithsonian Magazine, and I had
one of those websites where you have like a page and 20 followers a
and
day.
order this granola and we'll mail it to you, or order this, a moonshine cake or something. And I had 24 hits on my website on Tuesday.
Yeah.
And the next morning, the New York Times front page of the food section story came out, and I had 57,000 hits on my website.
It's amazing you didn't crash.
Oh, I came close to crashing.
Yeah.
Not the website, but me. And the mailman would back his truck up and pick up our few packages every week. And then he got out and he saw all these boxes on the front porch and scratched his head. And he says, "That's a lot out here." I said, "Oh, but there's a lot inside too."
You have no idea.
So Dwight took some time off. We baked, we packaged, we shipped. And I figured if I'm ever going to do anything, now's the time.
Yeah.
And so we signed the lease on the old gas station and opened it up just as...
Did you get investors?
I had some lined up, and then the Great Recession hit.
Right as you were opening?
Yes.
Oh.
And so...
But you'd already signed the lease.
Yes. And so it all, fell back in my court, and I was the only guy.
Because looking back at the small business experience, the entrepreneurial part of it, I mean, the investment part's key. You need the investors. I mean, did you have a bank that was working with you? Did you have any safety net?
I was just this green kid, and I showed up at Middleburg Bank, and I felt
Gave
like
them a cake.
No, I probably brought them some cookies or granola, and they kind of just patted me on the head and then on the butt.
It showed you
nice
the door.
try is pretty much what they were saying. But it was just me cashing in my savings to get it up and running. And there were some sleepless nights and fretting about paying the rent, making payroll, paying our suppliers.
Did you ever seriously question that? Do I know what I'm doing? Maybe. Did you ever think of throwing it in?
Well, it was kind of seat of my pants, but I thought, I wouldn't have done this if I didn't think they could work out here. I mean, looking back, I never thought it would work this well, but it's, it was a little scary.
What was the next turning point that rescued you from the recession?
Well, Obama was just coming into office. He inherited this economy, and I figured, well, if anybody's going to take care of this, these guys will. So, I mean, I didn't have any choice, so stuck with it. And then... Because of your lease. Yeah, and because
your commitment.
I didn't have a job. And, and there's other people with jobs that I had to take care of. So... we bounced back. I think the economy did. We did. People were shopping Old Town Warrenton again and buying our stuff and shipping it nationwide. And Southern... You were getting good press, too. Southern Living wrote a little piece as part of an outline of antiquing in the Blue Ridge in the Shenandoah Valley. And, I mean, immediately people would show up that were driving from Charlotte or Nashville somewhere north, and they would veer off and come see us, and they'd have Southern Living under their arm, and then they'd go shop in the streets, in the stores down the street. But you and Dwight were not unlike those people, because you had your own mentors of that sort. I mean, you were road trippers, and you were devoted to Jane and Michael Stern. In our glove compartment was a copy of their book of the funky little places to go that are road food. Off the beaten path. Off the road, yeah. And it was called Road Food, and we would refer to it. And one day we were open, and in walks Michael Stern, and Jane and Michael Stern both came later, but I just looked at him, and he looked at this and thought, wow, this is amazing. And I said, it's all your fault. You planted this seed, and I wanted to do some funky little thing. Yeah. And they put you in the book? We were in the next volume, and then their 10th anniversary book just came out with their honor roll of the 100 best, and we were in the book and in their honor roll. And then on the cover is a map of the U.S., and there's there must be 1,000 food places inside their book. Yeah. And there maybe are 12 cited on the map. Yeah. And here we are, Red Truck Bakery, right under the Road Food. Yeah, so that was pretty amazing. And now they're our loudest fans, and they write about us for Savor. They were on Splendid Table on NPR. And the
Well, you
best
get
line
loads
was
of good press.
Yeah, the best line was Jane Stern saying, "You'll find me in the corner drinking my moonshine cake," which
Well, that opens the door to something I wanted to talk to you about, because there is hooch in a lot of your recipes. And we have one right here. This is and I'll hold it very carefully.
That's our Lexington bourbon cake. We didn't start off this way.
But I think it looks like the symbol for a hurricane. But it's gorgeous. This is a gorgeous cake. And this is relatively recent. This is a new addition.
That's newer than the cookbook.
But how do you cook with hooch? How do you learn to cook with alcohol? How do you learn?
It started with moonshine. I was opening
something with everybody,
in
it starts with
Virginia,
moonshine.
so we found this guy. I call him our guy in the next county making hooch, but he's the first legit moonshiner in the country, which only means that he pays taxes, but so he can market it. And we came up with this chocolate moonshine cake. Later, also a lemon blueberry version. Dwight's choir director from Sanford, North Carolina, made this down there very famous rum cake, and made sure that it was at Dwight's house every time he came down. And I fell in love with that cake. And Dwight's mom made sure we got the recipe before Alma Hackney died. But Alma was Dwight's Presbyterian choir director. Dwight's dad was
knew her moonshine.
No, well, she was a rum gal, and Dwight's dad was the local postman. So she had him drive her to the ABC store.
Yeah.
She'd hunker down in the car while he went inside, because no self-respecting Presbyterian choir director can get caught inside a liquor store. But he would buy her rum, and she made the cake. In the October issue of Southern Living magazine, we're referred to as the bakery with a drinking problem. But it's, we have
How
the rum
much alcohol do you buy a month?
We go through a lot of it. And lucky for us, we have an ABC store nearby, because we still have to get it just like everybody else does.
You can't get it brought to you the way a restaurant does?
No.
Why?
We buy it there. We don't have to pay taxes on it, so...
do you go through cases and
we
cases?
We do go through cases. And
Black
Friday, I found out that the ABC store was having a 20% off sale.
And you stocked up.
I backed right in. And so we have our original rum cake, our two moonshine cakes, our new and splendid Lexington bourbon cake. There's a distillery in Middleburg called Mount Defiance, and we tried a bunch of things when they opened, but their amaretto was like drinking honey, and it was so luscious that we invented this almond cake. It's gluten-free, and we have some of that today.
That's great.
It's pretty good.
How do you master portion control? I'm curious. Were you the guinea pig? How do you figure out?
Are we still talking about hooch?
I'm talking about hooch, because I want to get the secrets of how to bake with it.
Well, the more you sample, the better it all feels and tastes.
Yeah.
So but it can't be so oppressive that you just kind of reel back.
But you do have a warning on all your.
Oh yeah, that's Dwight's line: eat responsibly, and it's truthful. But this is a great cake, and it's got. We were down in Lexington for the Southern Foodways Alliance conference this summer. Lexington was a great host. We fell in love with the city, and we did some great drinking at some high-end bars. Everything's bourbon, of course, down there. And so this is everything I love in a cocktail, and that's bourbon, ginger. There's fresh grated ginger root, crystallized ginger, orange zest, lemon zest. And then we toured Wild Turkey Distillery while we were down there, and discovered their new honey sting liqueur, which is made with ghost peppers. So we use that in the glaze. So
ghost peppers.
There's a little sting that matches the bite of ginger root.
The crystallized ginger is key in your story. Tell us about the Arlington Fair. What happened?
I was still at the Post. We had just bought a house in Arlington, and suddenly I realized that there's a county fair here, and I could enter something. And I started playing with peach preserves, and an older friend of ours, Mary Jones, came by. And was so coincidental, she brought a big jug of crystallized ginger.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, this would be perfect. So I just chopped it up and threw it in there, entered it in the county fair.
And a jam?
In peach jam.
In peach jam.
And then I dropped it off at the fair, flew home to Monterey for a week. Dwight checked on it the next day, called me up and said, sit down for this. You won an honorable mention. And I said, oh, great, a ribbon for the kitchen. He says, oh, well, you also won first place. You also won the theme prize, and you were named grand champion of the fair for this. And he says, and the judges told me that it was because of the crystallized ginger. So I thought that was pretty crazy.
Ginger is an amazing...
So I wrote about it for the food section of the Post. And
what are your favorite ingredients if you had to say, if you had to name 5 that you couldn't live without? And I'm not counting flour. I'm counting the things. I want to hear about the things that are like the crystallized ginger that bring that special
unique things. And the cookbooks got them because they mean so much to me. Sorghum is a big deal. A family came in from, I guess they were from Pennsylvania, and they asked for shoe-fly pie. And I said, well, I kind of see us as a little Southern bakery, and that's a little more Yankee for us. And when I moved to DC, I of course made road trips up to Lebanon and Amish country, and liked but not loved shoe-fly pie. It was so heavy and dense.
Shoe-fly pie?
It's molasses. It's thick. It's cloying. It's dry.
Like a pecan pie?
Well, that's a lot gooier.
Okay.
This is just a thicker, kind of tougher, cakey pie.
Okay.
I said to this guy that, well, that gives me an idea. Check back. And so I came up with not your Amish grandmother's shoe-fly pie, and it's made with a much lighter golden sorghum. It's lightened up with our crumbled up orange cake and lemon cake. And I also needed a way to burn up some of the food that was left over. We don't often have a lot of cakes left over, but they go in the freezer. And I thought, well, that would be perfect to lighten up this thing. So sorghum is important. I need to veer off a second to tell about that. We were getting ready to photograph the cookbook, and a big part are our purveyors, and I wanted them to be a part of the book. And of course, our hooch guys in there, our amaretto guy, our tomato farmer in the Shenandoah Valley. And so we went and visited all these guys, and I wanted to meet my sorghum guy. And he doesn't do online, so I always have to call him up. He's really outgoing and gregarious. And he gave me directions, and I keyed it into Google. And it took me to this, I lost a signal. I ended up in this little Mennonite town, and I drove up between a house and a barn and got out to ask directions. And the guy comes out and says, well, hey, Brian, we've been waiting for you. And I never would have dreamed it was this Mennonite family doing it. And they came out and they showed us their sorghum patch, which is a real food. I mean, it's not
like,
corn.
Is it a plant?
It looks like corn, but it's sorghum. And then it's all hand cranked, and the kids were shoving it in while Dad was cranking it. And there's another little kid, all in Mennonite wear, with a bucket catching all the juice running out. And then they distill it in their barn.
Did you hang out?
Yeah, and I had a good friend with me, Elaine Chon Baker, who's Korean, and she brought her kids. And once I realized we're in Mennonite country, what are they going to think? They've never seen a Korean family, and they hit it off. And the kids were playing with the kids, and everybody's, they're still good buddies. And she's done a lot with them to get their business up and running.
So crystallized ginger, sorghum.
Let's see.
When you do your apples, is it a particular kind of apple for your apple pies?
It's local apples, so that changes. Honey Crisps are great. Granny Smiths are great. I like to combine them. I like to have at least 3 or 4 or 5 apples in our pies. Stamens are good. Matsus are good.
Do you own any of your own orchards, or do you get them all?
No, we have a good collection of farmers in the area. I mean, we're in apple country, so that's not hard. I planted some trees when we bought the farm, but I realize that we're only we're short timers on here, and all these animals and critters have been here forever. And I'd go out on weekends, and everything I was waiting for would be just the pumpkins were carved through with big old paw prints. I've never known that a groundhog can climb a peach tree. And here he is up there, totally oblivious to me. And, I never had peaches. The cherries get eaten alive before we get out there. So it's pretty much counting
But everything
on.
you make is really derived from Virginia and Maryland. It's from the local area. You're not importing from far away unless you have to?
No, lately we've been playing with pawpaws, which sound and taste like they're from the Caribbean.
Yeah.
But they're a native American fruit and wild. And we use those in a pawpaw chess pie, or as I like to say, pawpaw pie. And that's kind of fun. I like funky stuff that's new or even old, but kind of undiscovered lately and revisited.
Do you still tinker?
Oh yeah, every day. I mean, this thing was right after we came back from down there. I started playing. I was working on the cookbook, and Jan, my pie baker, was right next to me, and it was sweet potato pecan pie with bourbon season. And I grabbed some of the roasted sweet potatoes, and I made sweet potato panettone, which is in the book, and it's so gorgeous and beautiful and easy. So I'm kind of always playing. I want to get back and make some more of that this week.
Have you ever been approached by Top Chef or approached them, or if they approached you, would you want to do anything like that?
No, I don't think so. We'll look at this later and realize how bad I am on camera, but.
I don't think that's the part of Top Chef that is
No,
key. I think it's
the knife
it's
in the back
tinkering
thing. I think that's the worst part. But I've gotten emails from like holiday cookie competitions. We want you, and I just think, oh boy, that's
If it's not on TV, don't waste your time.
No, I mean, I don't know. We're not kind of all about that. I love watching it. Last night, Top Chef was on again, and they're saluting Kentucky and Louisville and Lexington.
Speaking of bourbon, speaking of hooch.
Yeah, I think we're just ahead of the curve here.
But you've, in a very short time, you've expanded from one business to a second, and even that second business in its own way has evolved into much more than a bakery. Have you ever talked about or thought about going that next step and doing a restaurant?
No. I
Because?
don't think I want any part of a restaurant. I would
You're
have to talk to
practically
one of my good friends who used to run a restaurant, and she, I'm sure, would talk me out of it.
Yeah, well, do it with other people's money. That would be my advice.
Okay.
But seriously, you are so close to that. I mean, the only thing you're not doing is serving alcohol, but then arguably you are.
Yeah, but I don't want to be a restaurant guy, and I like what we're doing. I don't even want another store. We get approached. That's what we hear all the time. Please come to Herndon. Please come to Ashburn. Please come to Alexandria. We want you at the wharf.
I would just say come to Georgetown.
Yeah. Well, I got a big dog and pony show about the wharf, and but it's the same thing as being next door to a nail salon in a strip center. It's all about the destination and
you want the authenticity.
I mean, what we will do is grow our online business. We had to shut it down yesterday for the holidays, which it's way too early to do that, but we just, because of the cookbook and another factor of a 25% discount that our online processor was offering, all our available days for baking and shipping just hit max. So we can't send out.
But that's a good thing, right?
Yeah, but it's a bad thing for people that are on the 7th of December when
who still want to get
well.
You get in the car and you drive to.
Yeah, we can do that, and you can mail it yourself. But we gotta find a better way to handle online shipping and the quantities.
Yeah.
Because that's manageable for us. I'd much rather do that than open another store and have to train a whole nother staff and just hope that that moonshine cake or those cranberry muffins that they're making are the same as we're making and Warrenton's making yesterday and Warrenton was making, 6 years ago. It all has to be consistent, and it's really hard to do
what people here in Washington would want to know is it possible to get same-day delivery here in D.C. or in the D.C. area?
Only Carol Joint and Barack Obama get that service. And Carol, only if I'm driving to Georgetown anyway.
Let's talk about Barack Obama because we're almost out of time because it is a very sweet story.
Okay, but I will say we do ship, but just order after December 25th, and we'll get it to you the next day.
So we have a few minutes left. Let's hear about Barack Obama because that is.
So after that whole thing and the investors and the crash,
the recession,
right, and things came back, and we opened the second store, and now I've got 40-something employees, and we're 2 locations. We're shipping thousands of things across the country, and we had a crazy first Christmas at our new store.
Yeah.
After Christmas, I just thought, what just happened? I mean, we were all just burned out, but it was so crazy. We've never seen sales like that. We've never got notes like we've got, and it was just pretty amazing. So I sat down in a very slow day in January and just wrote a note to Obama and told him all that. And,
fan letter.
Yeah, and and then mailed it, and I never thought another thing about it. And, I know he gets 10 letters a day dropped on the desk, and that was mid-January, and Valentine's weekend, I was off, and my store manager called up and said, somebody just came by with a letter from the White House. Said, I'll look at it tomorrow. And I came in, and it was hand-delivered, and the guy bought, as it turns out, a moonshine cake and a pecan pie and took it back with him.
And it was a letter from the president.
But I didn't know, I don't know, how did it get here? And the next day, the guy wrote me and emailed me, and it was Cody Keenan, who is Obama's chief speechwriter. And he wrote and said, we don't normally hand deliver correspondence from the president, but we did it for 3 reasons. 1, the president likes your story. 2, the president loves pie. And I'm on my way to the Inn at Little Washington for Valentine's weekend with my fiance. So, and then told me about what he took back. And I said, thanks for telling us who you were. But the pie you should have gotten in front of the president was our sweet potato bourbon pecan pie. And he wrote back, said, just a second. And then a minute later comes back a 3-word email. POTUS says yes. So the next day I was baking pie and same day delivery.
Yes, I remember. Actually, I remember once you came by to drop something off for me, and you opened up the back of your van, and there were bags that were going to a special VIP.
Yeah, well, so we were kind of sneaking them into the White House, and as I like to say, we never knew if we were sneaking around the Secret Service or around his wife Michelle, and it's probably the latter. But when they opened, when he was out of office and opened his private office in the West End, we were asked to provide breakfast the first day as they all got to know each other, and of course we brought pie, and
I love pie for breakfast.
I think you're not the only one.
Yeah, no.
And I found this woman on Etsy who collects and sells sterling silver pie servers and hand punches letter by letter, kind of an engraving. I think it's kind of a wedding thing, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But I had her do what Obama said to us was, I like pie, that's not a state secret, and Red Truck Bakery makes darn good pie. And so I made 2 of those pie servers, and he took those.
How'd you get the pie past the Secret Service? I guess they don't mind tasting each pie before it goes to
the secret is if a staffer carries in their own thing, then it's fine. So it's just a matter
I don't know that anybody should know that.
Well, no, but it was a secret drop to Cody.
Yeah.
But the one thing I left out, which was the best thing of all, was back when an administration had a good sense of humor, on 3/14 Pi Day, 3.14 March 14th, Obama, still in office, wrote this whole nice salute to us in our story, and it was on the White House website. and his own personal Facebook page. And we heard the day before that it was coming, and so around about noon or 1 o'clock, I sent an email to Cody and said, "Oh, we're kind of ready for this, but is it going to happen?" And he says, "Let me check." And a guy with a sense of humor, at 3:14 p.m. on 314 comes this whole unload that just kind of changed our whole life, which was just as we were shopping around a cookbook. And that night, Clarkson Potter Random House just said, "It's ours." And and we got a nice cover blurb from the president.
Here's your book on the Georgetown cupcakes. We're done. We're gonna break now. We're gonna let the audience at home go to their computers and order
for January.
And then also remember to get his coffee, the Bulldog coffee.
Well, this is my salute to my
Ben
former
Bradley.
life. I wanted a good, robust coffee, and I named it after the most robust, boldest dude I knew. And
it's a wonderful coffee.
It's our Bulldog edition, which is an old newspaper term for the earliest edition of a newspaper.
And it goes beautifully with pie and cake. But everybody here now gets to jump over here to the buffet table and tinker with some of your delights over there. But
Tinker's the word.
Tinker's the word of the day. Brian, thank you so much.
Thanks very much.
Don't let me pull your arm too tight. Thank you, everyone. Happy holidays. Happy New Year. See you in 2019. Thank you. Bye.